Welcome back, guys. It's Bo at ZZPerformance. Today we're talking all about Zoomer's 97 GTP, the highest front-wheel drive wheel horsepower M90 in the world. As you can see, it's still very street car. Has 67,000 original miles on this body. It's been with ZZPerformance since essentially day one. I think Zoom bought it off eBay back in the day with a big old wing, some crazy graphics up the side. It really kind of set a precedence in the scene early on, I think, for its looks, and it definitely lived up to its looks very quickly as Zoom perfected a lot of 3800 parts on this, pushing the market with Matt and Turbo Tim. It's been around a long time, and as I came into ZZPerformance and had the privilege of carrying on the 3800 torch, it's been really fun bringing this back to a little bit of its former glory, drag racing it and getting the horsepower obviously back up to where it used to be. So, overall the car's pretty stock externally. We have a carbon fiber SD hood on it, and then obviously the wrap. But if the big thing about this car is if it doesn't have a purpose and if it doesn't improve the performance, it's not here. So, you know, no fancy this and that's on this car at all. Starting on the ground, we got some OG centerline wheels, super lightweight wheels. They're 18 by 7.5. The car has had these wheels on it for years, and that's just due to how light they are and how well they fit. Behind that's a set of Grand Am brakes on all four corners. And then beyond that is our ZZP tubular control arms in the front and our tubular trailing arms in the rear. It has no sway bars on the car because there's a lot of weight in the sway bars and we don't really turn it. This car handles surprisingly well for not having sway bars on it, thanks to the ZZPerformance control arms, trailing arms, and coilovers that we're super big fans of. Huge weight savings in the coilover department over a conventional strut. It's sitting on ZZP coilovers on all four corners. The current off-the-shelf coilovers are really good, and tons of weight savings in the coilover department because you just don't have a big bulky strut. So other than that, it's got a 04 Plus or Monte Carlo aluminum subframe. That's been in the car a really long time. Super big mod that Zoom and Matt started doing way early back in the day. Just dropping that steel subframe and getting the aluminum one in it for weight savings. If you want to take a look inside real quick, it's got a full Catskins interior, ZZPerformance. You know, back in the day, the car was a little more race car. Now it's got a full interior in it. A little outdated, but we love it. You know, it's like stepping into a time capsule in here. It's got a cage in the back, light cage. Right now we do have the back seat out, but the back seat's very often in it. Just a little difficult to get in and out with the cage setup, so if I know we're going to be racing the car again in the upcoming months, I normally just keep it in the shop. Otherwise, you know, full dash, everything else. Still got the perf shift button, some cool stuff that Zoom added over the years. It does have the HVAC box out, and that's just because it didn't get one put back in it after the interior was done. So a custom center gauge and everything else, but very Grand Prix inside still. To my left, we got a AEM wideband, fuel pressure, and boost. This boost gauge and fuel pressure gauge has been in the car for years. It's what Zoom had in it. The wideband's recently been added just for me, tuning it on the street. Stepping under the hood where all the magic happens. Obviously, M90 supercharged, Gen 5. The car's been on a Gen 5 for a long time. It was twin charged back in the day and went 9s, but it's kind of been our M90 flagship car for a lot of years. The current M90 on it's bone stock M90 with some new fluid. We went ahead and bolted our throttle body to that, or our throttle body adapter, sorry, with the North Star. If you notice, this North Star is actually flipped upside down. That's just for hood clearance. The Gen 5 supercharger has a symmetrical bolt pattern, so you can rotate that throttle body to accommodate a little more hood clearance. You know, just one of the details that goes into putting this car together. We're going to really stress on details today. Everything has its place, everything has its purpose, and you don't achieve these type of numbers and times without thinking everything through. Standard intake box off the shelf, big old 9-inch filter. We're really big on keeping the filter size large on these supercharged 3800s, and then the 4-inch tube to obviously get as much air into the M90 as we can, since we're so limited by its capabilities. Beyond that, we have the brand new Supercore. Some of the best IATs we've seen in a long time on the 3800 with this Supercore. We're seeing, you know, at the end of a quarter-mile pass, around 160-degree post intercooler intake temps, which is really good because they're well over 300 on top of that intercooler core. So we're pulling a lot of heat out of the charge temp and getting it a lot more dense so we can create more horsepower and obviously reduce KR. Another detail I want to touch on is below that we have a ported and gasket matched lower intake manifold. We need to do everything we can to make sure that the air going in and out of this is as efficient and effective and as easy flowing as possible. So we've gasket matched the lower intake to a aluminum gasket literally perfectly, and when we bolt it together we make sure the intake manifold's situated just right so that it's a nice linear transition from the limb to the cylinder head. Onto the cylinder head, which is where a lot of the magic happens in this setup. It's a bone stock aluminum cylinder head, ZZPerformance cylinder head. Got a little bit better casting design and they flow really well in stock form. We do have a ported set of heads that we'll probably put on this car as we push towards the 500 wheel horsepower mark, which is where we're headed next. So that in conjunction with some other porting in the blower will probably hopefully yield the gains we're looking for. So beyond that, 165 rockers, you know, that's taking a lot of valve train weight out. There's some weight, everything's about weight savings, right? So we're literally taking weight out of the valve train, suspension anywhere we can. You know, less rotating mass equals more horsepower. So 165 rockers, the lightweight modified steel retainer, which is actually lighter than the old titanium retainers due to its low profile design, and they're actually stronger. So really happy with those. We revved this thing to 6,600 RPM the other day on the dyno just because we don't rev it there all the time, but it's capable of doing that. The big thing in the valve train, running a loose push rod, we're not putting a lot of stress on, you know, we're not adding unnecessary friction to moving components within the valve train. You know, we do like the standard non-roller rocker just because we get all the lift out of that valve. The valves themselves are the standard valves for the aluminum heads, so nothing crazy there in the valve train besides the 165 rockers. And this is all stuff you guys can buy. No, we don't have aluminum heads, but they are out there. The valve train is just stuff off the website. So I did go ahead and I went through and made sure all the rocker arms felt nice fluid when I installed them, something you're going to want to do too if you're pushing this, you know, to the 400 horsepower mark. And then just make sure they're not side loading on the pedestal under full travel. Just the little details like this, you know, we can't have frictional loss like that and expect to make 467 horsepower. I guess otherwise that brings us down to the camshaft. This is an NIC Plus, we're calling it, cam grind. It's kind of left over from the stroker project. And it's just been working really well and we haven't had a major reason to change it. I know Zoom's kind of pushing me to get a smaller cam in the car, which will definitely entertain. But this is what we're calling the NIC Plus. We'll have Mike drop the specs in the vid. But it's been working really good, and it's allowing, what I feel it's allowing us to do is get away with a super aggressive pulley, some aggressive timing, and overall just really leaning on this setup. You know, it made 422 horsepower about a year and a half, 2 years ago, but we weren't really leaning on the setup. This year when I got the car out, I really wanted to optimize and lean on it. You know, airfeel wise, boost wise, timing wise, I wanted to put everything on the ragged edge, and that's the ultimate result of what we're seeing here in the dyno video. So with the NIC Plus, we got a stock bottom end L36. God's gift, the most glorious short block ever made. It's a Series 2. It's a Series 2 L36, it's a naturally aspirated, it's 9.4 to 1 compression. The rod itself is a little weaker, but it's longer, so you get the compression bump. And what's cool about the L36 is they're affordable and they're everywhere because they came in every naturally aspirated Buick that Grandma had. This one specifically I pulled out of a Bonneville parts car we had after the Stroker project was shelved, and put that in here, and it's been jamming. So it is a good low mile bottom end, and it's just been really happy, and I'm very grateful that this thing is put up with the abuse that it has seen. You know, lots of rev limiter burnouts, lots of parking lot burnouts, shenanigans, but everything in between. So the short block itself is untouched, and I would recommend you do the same. Literally don't let the magic out. It's real. There's real magic in there. Stepping over here, Mike, you know, behind the front cover, we're rocking our Rollmaster double. And then, you know, just down to more details of what makes horsepower. We got our Mazir HD water pump. We're not spinning the water pump. That's you know, some good gains there, not spinning that water pump. We have an overdriven alternator pulley, so we're slowing down the alternator RPM. Obviously more gains to be had there with horsepower. I've gone through all the belts, checked all the pulleys and bearings, made sure they're freely turning, and then aligned everything accordingly as well. We pay a lot of attention when we bolt this blower down to making sure it's aligned really well with the crank sprocket, so we're not side loading the belt, we're not introducing any improper belt wear. It's really hard to keep this 2.6 pulley together in operating order at a lot of RPM. So one thing I have gone ahead and done just for a belt wrap is sandblasted the anodizing off where the ribs ride. It really aids you in not slipping the belt at high RPM, you know, pushing 14 pounds of boost on E98. E98 is another thing we're doing in the car right now, which has really allowed us to get aggressive, like I said, and set it on kill this year. The E98 has allowed us to up the boost, put a bunch of timing in it, run it lean and mean, and you know, it's got an 80-pound injector through our fuel rails, right back to a AEM 320 standard in-tank pump. Right now we're currently on the limits or past the limits of the fuel system, so we're going to be looking at something to do probably pump wise there and see if we can get a little more pressure behind these injectors. I think the 80s will hold on, but we'll see when we get there. Otherwise, you know, in the weight department, Zoom's always been super big about running these Bonneville idler brackets. They are aluminum instead of steel. Weight savings there, and plus we're not running the dog bone and the other steel mount there. Zoom's really particular about the weight. You know, it's one of the reasons why we run the Bonneville idler bracket is it's aluminum rather than steel. You lose the whole dog bone assembly on that side. As long as you got good other mounts, you're usually fine. You know, everything we do or put on and take off this car gets weighed, and if it's not lighter than what comes off, it doesn't go on. We've gone ahead and reinforced the mount on this side and added, everybody knows the ears like to break off, so we've welded, aluminum welded some stock on there and made them thicker, and then powder coated the bracket. We also have an AC delete on the car. We're not driving that compressor anymore, you know, it's just a replacement pulley that we offer on the website. The car hasn't had AC in years, so you drop a lot of weight and get a lot more airflow through the rad, removing the heat exchanger in the front for the AC system. But you know, it's kind of crazy to think how modified this whole belt routing setup is over here for being a Grand Prix. We got Bonneville parts on it, AC deletes, and overdriven balancers, and you know, fancy everything over here. But it's all in the grand scheme of details and making sure that we have it optimized to the best of our abilities for doing what we're doing. And you know, working with this little heat pump right here, M90. If you look around the car, there's various extra grounds on it. We love to ground these coil packs. I love to ground the alternator bracket. I love to ground the bell housing. Added grounds on both 10 mils on each side. Keep the ignition voltage, or the voltage system in the ignition, just performing crispy. It's got our fuel pump rewire on it, obviously, and then the power cable upgrade as well. just another small bag of tricks, you know, of things that you do to a car that is literally doubling the factory horsepower with not a lot of mechanical changes. So I guess there is a lot of mechanical changes, but not hard parts necessarily. Otherwise, I think that kind of ties it up for the engine. I guess the biggest thing I can say is keep it simple, stupid. It's not overcomplicated. It's just put together with a lot of care and respect for how everything operates. You know, you just really got to think horsepower when you're bolting this stuff together. Just because you have the mod list doesn't mean those parts are going to fall together and work perfectly. So, you know, 2-3 years ago, this car was making 390, and I haven't changed anything since other than just ironed out a lot of the details. So we're up, you know, 70 wheel horsepower with just details and caring for the overall setup here and there with small changes. It is running our power lugs and equalizer downpipe, which sounds absolutely amazing. A couple years ago, we did the testing on the 1 7/8 headers compared to the equalizer, and there wasn't a significant change in horsepower, about 8 or 10 horsepower. I'm currently wondering now if that was because the headers weren't the limiting factor of the setup and it was actually still the blower. I'm wondering once we get a little more blower flow if the headers will become a little bigger factor later down the road, so we'll still be experimenting with that again when we work on a ported blower. But currently, you know, the package is performing flawlessly and it sounds absolutely amazing. Like I said, we're running the equalizer downpipe and crossover. Below that is the TOG downpipe. That is the catted 3-inch downpipe. Anybody saying they can't run a cat on their car, we just made 467 horsepower through that cat yesterday, so I don't think it's holding us up that much. We are running the 3-inch catback with no resonator, so it's a little loud in here. Otherwise, you know, just keeping it simple. Some good parts put together with some good intent and obviously optimal results. You will see the intercooler system is a little modified from what we do sell. This is some leftover stuff on the car from when I was doing the short stack intercooler testing. We wanted to have a big fluid capacity. Sorry, at one point we were adding nanoparticles to this intercooler system as well. You know, Zoom's always got good ideas and bad ideas, but most of them are good and most of them are fun, and we try them all. We were adding nanoparticles to the coolant system to help to try and extract more heat out of the charge temps. So we added the swirl pot over here by the airbox. The swirl pot, we were dumping nanoparticles in, swirling them up, doing dyno pulls, trying to pull more IETs down. So the swirl pot's a super cool feature for pulling the air out of the coolant, and it's still there. Does it need to be there anymore? Probably not. So, you know, Zoom is on me about lightening up this intercooler system, which we will definitely work on over the winter. But I'm really big on capacity. If you got a big fluid capacity, it's not going to be as prone to overheat as quickly, just like on the Cobalt, you know, stealth heat exchanger, which is actually what we're running here. Alrighty, onto the cooling system of the car. We are running a Felpro head gasket. I like running the Felpro head gasket because it adds a little bit of a fuse when we're running the aluminum head. If we were to run into a detonation situation, it's going to torch the head and not the MLS gasket. And these heads are irreplaceable. So we do have a Felpro gasket in the car because that is my fuse ultimately when things go wrong. And they're just very reliable. On the top of the cooling system, we're running a 160-degree thermostat. When we were doing the nanoparticle testing and the stage 2 intercooler testing and all that other intercooler testing, I could not get the IETs below coolant temp. At least at the end of a long pull. So 160 thermostat, obviously, and we're running 160 IETs. It kind of makes sense. The car does have a factory radiator in it. Zoom has always ran the factory rad in it, I believe, because it's a little lighter than the aluminum, actually. Which he's a killer fan of aluminum rads, so it shows you how dedicated he is to weight savings. As far as the transmission goes, we're putting the power down through a standard 65E input shaft, pump shaft, 2500 stall converter, HD flex plate. Car sporting 369 gears, 2500 stall trans. It works pretty good on the straight. The 369 gear is very, very, very aggressive and probably not something you're going to want in a daily driver. But for this car, it's just right. This car goes through the traps at 125 at about 6,400 RPM, so on a 26-inch tire. It's pretty perfect, really. For at least what we're doing. We just need to make up the short track. If we make up the short track, we got the mile an hour to run a 1080, so that's kind of the goal. Otherwise, our full ignition system's on the car. These 3800s are very prone for having ignition system issues. I think the ZZP coil packs are a killer addition for resolving some of those things, along with the plug wires. Do not ever run anything but an OEM ICM in these cars. And then we're just running an NGK TR6 gapped at 40 thou. That's pretty standard for any 3800 running more than 12 pounds of boost, in my opinion. 40 thou on the plug gap. If you got a misfire at 40 thou on a 3800, then you got other issues going on. Sorry for forgetting to mention, we're on a 2.6 overdriven pulley. And like I said, that's making it about 14 pounds of boost right now on the dyno. So a little over boosted in most people's opinion, but we're getting away with it with the fuel. And I've never had this car not make more horsepower with more boost. Now I'm not gonna push it past 14 pounds by any means, but you know, just like when we reflect back to when it made 422, that was on 11 pounds. So we're up 3 pounds of boost. We're up, you know, even if we're getting 10 wheel a pound of boost, that's usually where it's at. So you by no means want to overboost your low octane daily driver. This car is purpose-built race car. I normally like lower boosted cars and a lot more timing, but considering what we're doing with the car, it was kind of time to you know, lean on it. I guess that's kind of, if you take away anything, attention to detail and leaning on it is what we've done in the last year. You know, and it's obviously proven itself. So I think that mostly buttons it up from the drivetrain compartment. I'm wanting to talk about more, but there's really not more here. If there's anything you can take away from this, is just the details, the details, the details. It's all about the details. Details, details, details. One other detail is we got 3/8 vacuum line, and this is a trick Turbo Tim likes to use, and instead of using 5/16 or 1/4 inch vacuum line, we have big thick 3/8 vac line running to everything. Make sure you know, we have no restrictions going to the fuel pressure regulator or the map sensor, and that's just coming right off the lower intake manifold. We do have our new fancy aluminum vac cap for extra clearance with this Super Core. Go ahead and quick pop the trunk because there's some cool stuff back there. The top's been completely skinned. Normally there's a lot of structural bars here. Those have all been removed, and then the trunk was repainted years ago. The full spare tire well's been removed and replaced with aluminum. And one of the reasons why that is there's a big parachute under there, and if you pan down here, Mike, we got the plate on zip ties, so when we're going down the track, that opens up and you get all the air to evacuate through there. You know, shouts to Zoom and the guys for creating this lifestyle we're allowed to live, modding these cool, unexpected cars. Thanks to you guys for being there since day one. You know, we really appreciate the 3800 platform. It's still one of our largest platforms. It's a privilege to continue pushing this stuff. You know, we're still working on lots of R&D parts and doing what we can to continue to bring you guys cool stuff. You know, Zoom and all the guys are still very passionate. And I think this car being back to its, you know, ripping horsepower levels and being around the shop sounding badass has reignited a lot of that inside of us, and we hope it does with you guys too. I guess overall, we just couldn't do this without you guys, and it is cliche as that sounds, it's very true. And you know, we all get to wake up every day and do what we do because of you guys. So overall, what started as an old Grand Prix and a throttle body, ZZPerformance's first part, is now a you know, world record setting in many ways M90 car, and we're gonna keep playing with it. If there's anything you guys got questions about, feel free to comment in the video. Mike will get back to you. Or if you want to talk more in depth about the setup, shoot me an email, bo.c@zzperformance.com, or heck, even shoot Zoomer an email. He'd love to hear any questions you got about the car. Otherwise, we're just gonna keep on keeping on. We will be back at the track this fall with some light changes, but it's overall in its current state for this year. And then we'll probably hit the ground running next year for the chase for 500. So, you know, we're happy to keep bringing you guys the content. Let us know what you want to see. Thanks for tuning in. It's bo.c@zzperformance. This is Zoomer. We'll catch you next time.